Well, let's bring in three MPs to discuss the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report and the way the government is treating the release of the information about the costs of the mission in Iraq. From the foyer of the Commons, we're joined by the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Defence, that is James Bezan. We're also joined by Alain Michaud, the Deputy Defence Critic for the Official Opposition, NDP, and Joyce Murray, the Defence Critic for the Liberal Party. Good to see you all. Mr. Bezan, let me start with you. We just spoke with the Parliamentary Budget Officer who says the PBO numbers released today are to be believed over the government's cost estimates for the mission in Iraq because the PBO's estimated all the costs of the mission, broken it all down, while the Minister of Defence hasn't given a breakdown of his estimates. What's your response to that?
We said right from the start, Peter, that we would be reporting the hard numbers as they came available. We're at that position now as we table the supplemental estimate C, which will be tabled on Thursday, which will give a breakdown of the $122 million. As Minister Kenney has said, this does not include the costs of either bringing the troops home or extending the mission beyond the 6-month mandate that Parliament gave the Government of Canada to deploy the Canadian Armed Forces to fight ISIL and their barbaric terrorist regime. So our numbers are going to be more fully disclosed once the estimates are tabled so people can see the breakdown of it. And I can tell you that this is based on fact and not assumptions.
Okay, what about the timing? It seems curious to some, the timing. Is it just coincidental you're saying that the PBO announces yesterday it's going to release a detailed costing today, and the Minister yesterday, Mr. Kenney, releases the government's numbers saying that that we'll find out more when the supplementary estimates are tabled on Thursday? Are you saying those two things are just coincidental?
What I'm saying is that we want to be transparent and accountable, as we said right from the start, and that's why we've released the number of $122 million. That number has just become apparent and fully hardened up by the Department of National Defence, that we could then present that to parliamentarians and the public. And of course, that'll be in the supplemental estimates that will be tabled on Thursday.
Okay. Alain Michaud, let me move to you. What do you believe the PBO's estimates tell us today about the cost of the mission in Iraq?
Well, finally, we have a clearer picture because the PBO actually broke down the cost. Of course, they had to infer some of the information because the defense and the minister wouldn't release some of the information, which is a problem. They might have broken the law, actually. So that is one of the issues.
Security and cabinet secrecy.
Hang on,
that
Mr.
is
Bezan.
one of the issues here.
I'll tell you right now, we're going to revisit this part of the issue, so everybody will get a chance. Alain Michaud, finish your thought, and then we'll move on.
So I was saying, so the information that we have here, the PBO also is telling us that the cost of the mission could be a lot more than the $122 million that was announced by Minister Kenney. We don't even know where that number is coming from. He didn't give us any breakdown, any more information. They're telling us the information will come later, but they have the full estimates in their possession right now. So I think the PBO just forced their hand, and I'm hearing Mr. Bezan tell the government wants to be transparent. That's the first I'm hearing about this, and this, the numbers that were given out by the minister, to me, it's not a proof of transparency. It's a proof that their hand was forced.
Okay, Joyce Murray, what's your reaction to the report today, and why is it so important to know the cost?
Well, Peter, why don't I just take this back a couple of steps for your viewers, because an important part of this is that the opposition members of Parliament have been asking the government and the minister to provide cost estimates for the last 4 months. Those kinds of estimates have been provided by the governments of Australia and the United States to their parliaments and to their people, and this government has refused to provide a single cost estimate, even though they've been receiving them from the armed forces, from National Defence. That's why the opposition parties went to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, whose job is to find out financial and economic information at the request of members of Parliament so that we can provide that to the public. The public has a right to know what's being spent on this mission. So that's the background here. Okay. When the PBO then was about to table his report, which includes the information that every single request for detail was not satisfied by the government, the minister did an end run the day before, throws out one single number, not a single piece of detail or analysis, to try and end run the PBO's report. And that's simply unacceptable.
Mr. Bezan, we talked about that with the I talked about that with the parliamentary budget officer as well. The reason the government refused and DND refused to turn over so much of that information, it said, was to do with cabinet confidence. But if it was about cabinet confidence, why did Mr. Kenney go ahead and release the numbers yesterday?
Because we have to table our supplementary estimates. There is a cost tied to the mission. We need more allocations to continue on with this mission. And just to put things in perspective here, you know, we are being accountable and transparent and giving hard numbers, not estimates as the opposition have been wanting. We want to make sure that we are sure about the numbers that we are reporting back to Canadians, that it isn't misleading. We want to have hard facts, and that the numbers represent the actual tempo and operations of Operation Impact and the great job that our men and women are doing in fighting this barbaric regime that has threatened Canada's own security.
So what's wrong with having the parliamentary budget officer have the same access to the same numbers that the government and DND has, so he can do an independent costing of all of this?
Because timing is everything, right? We don't want to be disclosing stuff prematurely that might compromise operational integrity. We don't want to be violating cabinet secrecies and cabinet documents. So there is things that you have to respect within the law and within the mandate of the Canadian Armed Forces to ensure the safety. And let's put this in perspective. You've got to remember here, the NDP and the Liberals are opposed to this mission. They are opposed to any dollar spent in helping the people of Iraq battle the ISIL terrorists. And so we want to make sure people understand this, and that we will provide the money and the equipment and making sure the compensation to our great men and women who serve our country are doing it, and we want to support them 100%, unlike the opposition.
I want to take on the misinformation here.
And then we'll hear from Elaine Michaud. Go ahead,
because the parliamentary budget officer has top security clearance. He has every ability, and he often does keep things absolutely in confidence, needs the information to bring out the full picture, and so cabinet confidence is a false excuse, and so is the sensitivity of the information a false excuse. The PBO is exactly set up to have that kind of safety and security of the information and not reveal anything that's sensitive. So this government is pretending that they can't release it, but in fact they haven't wanted to, and I call that deceptive.
Okay, Elaine Michaud, what's your response to this notion of cabinet confidence?
I find it's absolutely ridiculous. Such information about the cost has already been available for past missions, so I don't understand what's different about this particular mission, and we're not asking to reveal any information that would put our men and women in danger. I'm from a military family. Both my parents are in the military, still active, so I understand how important it is to keep our men and women safe while they're overseas. What we're asking here is the government, we had been asking for months for the government to be transparent, and we had to force their hand by using PBO's help. I find that absolutely unacceptable and honestly quite ridiculous.
Mr. Bezan, the parliamentary budget officer told me that when it came down to some of the costing, for instance, the cost of ammunition, he had to make an estimate based on the cost of ammunition that the Americans have made fully public. I guess why should the parliamentary budget officer in Canada have to rely on public information in the United States about ammunition costs to figure out the cost of the mission here in Canada?
Exactly.
We've got to make sure we remember that the operation that we're conducting in Iraq is one that is supported by Parliament, that we know that the brave men and women that are there, that there is costs tied to them being there, or they're all incremental, and those extra costs are being reported, as we have said right from the start, through normal processes. So we have the supplemental
but nobody has a more active part in the mission than the Americans, and they're making this public as they go.
Look, we've said right from the start, we wanted to make sure that the numbers that we're giving to Parliament and to Canadians, being open and transparent, are the actual costs tied to the mission. The $122 million is the actual cost, and this is what we need Parliament to approve through the supplementary estimate Cs, so that we can continue to the end of the year, March 31st. Now, we know that on April the 7th or before that, we have to make a decision on whether we extend the mission or whether the mission is wrapped up. And there's going to be costs on that side as well. And Minister Kenney has been very clear on this.
Elaine, as the parliamentary budget officer, he's saying the opposite thing. And so who do you trust? The government spokesperson on this, whether they've been secretive and deceptive, or the parliamentary budget officer whose job it is to get the facts from Canadians?
Let me come back to Elaine Michaud and Joyce Murray to finish on a question I asked earlier, and that is, the cost of the mission is the cost of the mission. And I guess people would like to know it sooner rather than later, and that's fair enough. And at the end of the day, I guess, what's the importance, Elaine Michaud, of knowing what the cost is if there is a desire by at least this government to engage in this mission, and it's going to cost what it's going to cost, and if it gets extended, it's going to cost a whole lot more. What's the importance of knowing the cost to the debate over whether the mission is worth doing?
It's a question of transparency. It's a question of openness.
You're opposed to the mission, so
and
you don't care if we have any.
Hang on, Mr. Bezan, let her finish.
It's a question, like I was saying, it is important to be honest and open with parliamentarians and Canadians as well. And as parliamentarians, we're going to have to use partially the information about the cost to make a decision of if we're going forward or not after April 7th. So we need to have...
Is the suggestion that if the costs increase to the point where you think public opinion might shift, that's the importance of knowing the cost?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's a question of openness and transparency. We need that information. Public has a right to know. People are asking questions in my writing, in other writings across the country as well. And as parliamentarians, we have a right to that information. And I cannot see why it's been taking so long to get it, first of all.
Okay, Joyce Murray, can I hear you on that, please, on the cost of the mission?
That is one of the core and primary responsibilities of members of Parliament. It's one of the key things that we're elected to come to this place to do, and that is to assure accountability of taxpayers' funds. And one way we do that is by understanding what the government is spending or planning to spend or overspending in terms of taxpayers' money. It's our job to do that. And this government has been historic in how difficult they make that job for us. Okay. The PBO's job is to help us do that, and even the PBO has been stonewalled all the way along. It's completely unacceptable. Completely unacceptable.
Well, I'm sorry, we could continue this conversation, I know, but we're out of time for this evening, and I'm sure we'll be revisiting this issue in the days ahead. But thank you all for joining me in this conversation tonight.
Thank you.
You bet, Peter.